I see it going right across my deck here now. I did not right up in his vicinity, but no, I didn't. So this is good too, Roger. Thanks for that information, sir, and I'll get back to you if we come up with anything. Over.
Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Breakers, a podcast about shipwrecks, loss, and lessons learned from maritime disasters. My name is Taylor, and I'll be one of your hosts today. And joining me, as always, will be Tanner. But first, the thing we always do first, patron shoutouts. We got one today. We have Cantaloupe Was Taken. Thank you very much for signing up. Hope you enjoyed the bonus content. Just a reminder, there's a $3 and a $5 tier. And if you think, oh, wow, I just want more shipwreck and shipwreck adjacent things in my life, give it a try. We can help you out there. With that, I'll bring Tanner into the fold. Tanner, how's it going?
Jawohl. Doing very well. Excited for this episode. I think we're back in a little bit of a roll with recording, so I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
We had our first snow of the season here in the Menasha Oshkosh area, so that was a lot of fun. My students took a break during their test to go to the window and look at the snow.
We actually had a decent little snow here as well. It was enough just to make the commute unpleasant.
It was very wet and very heavy, the snow we had here.
You know, wet and heavy describes most of the shipwrecks we talk about.
But yeah, I love this time of year. I love the first real snow is great. Just puts me in a good mood.
I kind of like snow right up until like New Year's, and then it's like, all right, that's enough of this. So, what have you been up to media-wise?
I feel like we did a sort of impromptu media check-in on our last bonus, but I don't remember what I mentioned. My biggest thing I've been watching is Black Sails.
I know I've heard good things about that. I've not watched it.
Yeah, it's like a series that it's like 10 years old at this point. And I had, obviously seen it around, but I think because it originally aired on Stars, it never really got the same circulation that some of your other,
like the HBO type
prestige TV series have. It's very good. If you've never heard of it, it's a show about pirates. It sort of blends historical pirates with fictional pirates who are mentioned in Robert Louis Stevenson's book Treasure Island.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of is, I believe the original premise was basically a prequel to Treasure Island, sort of showing how all of the things referenced in it had happened. So it's still set in, the real Caribbean with, real pirates. You've got your Blackbeard and you've got your Charles Vane and Jack Rackham and all of the names that you know. And then it's just, that sort of drama style show. It's very good. I like that it shows you, of course, you have your swashbuckling and your crazy pirate exploits, but it also shows some of the minutia of pirate / Caribbean / nautical life, careening the hull, the logistics of running a ship, quartermastery, all of those things are, mentioned at various points. And it really adds a lot to the depth of the show. You feel like the characters do have pirate lives off screen where they have to go about doing all these things.
It sounds like the kind of things that someone that listens to a shipwright podcast might be interested in.
Probably. I don't know why you wouldn't like Black Sails if you like shipwrecks and ships, piracy and things like that. Not a lot of actors that I was familiar with before watching the show. The exception being Ray Stevenson. He plays Blackbeard in season 3. He's, I think, the only actor I recognized before this. Titus Pullo from Rome, if you're trying to put your finger on who that is. He's in a bunch of stuff, though.
Yeah, I'm looking through the list of actors here, and there's not a lot that I recognize either.
The actor who plays Jack Rackham is great. He's probably my favorite actor in, I think, Toby Schmitz is his name. He's excellent in it. That's mostly what I've been doing, in addition to obviously podcast stuff, work stuff. How about you?
What have I done? I started a new book, America by Greg Grandin. It's pretty cool. It examines basically like 5 centuries worth of Western interaction with both North and South America.
Yeah, I've seen a lot about that because I know I follow him on Twitter. He's a good follow. So I've seen him post a lot about that stuff, but I haven't read it yet.
It's really interesting not treating like North and South America as isolated things, but connecting them together, because that's how the Spanish saw it. And it really is interesting how the Spanish have already been here for a long time before the English and the Dutch and people arrive. It's very interesting. It definitely helps kind of give you a more complete picture of the first interactions with like Native Americans and people in like Plymouth and stuff like that. It kind of gives you a lot of the backstory that's often missing, I think, when we talk about those things. Mm-hmm. So far, so good. I'm probably a third of the way through it. I definitely have been enjoying it so far, though. Then the other thing, I watched Death by Lightning, which I don't know if you had mentioned on the show, but we definitely talked about it.
I think it was my last media shout out, except here, the notes say Death by Lighting.
I see that. I saw that.
Leading cause of death in Poland.
It's really good. It kind of gave me like the death of Stalin kind of vibe to it, because it's definitely a historical piece, but it's not written like that. Like they say "f you" a lot. I don't think
yes, they do
as much in the 1880s.
I mean, we still had swear words. Yeah,
we did. It's really good though. Nick Offerman's great in it. And you were mentioning a couple of the guys who were from Boardwalk Empire and all that. And like you said, I would rewatch that. I would definitely watch that again. The guy that plays Gateau is, God, you just hate him. He's just like, you've met this guy before in life, and he's the worst.
Yeah, it's Matthew McFadden. He plays Tom in Succession. So if anyone who has seen Succession, there's a lot of carryover in terms of his energy at times between those two.
It's just so purely manic at certain points.
Yeah. What he reminds me of is, working in any sort of, customer service retail job, like Half Price Books. This happened particularly a lot, where you would, start a conversation with a customer, help them find something, answer a question. And then within like 20 seconds, you'd suddenly realize like, oh, I really should have like found something to do in the back room and not started the conversation with this person. Uh-huh. That type of energy exudes from him, really, in that where at first he just seems kind of like a nice, affable guy. And it like quickly, it transforms into, oh, this guy is off his proverbial rocker.
Yeah, highly recommend that. Definitely worth checking out. Well, are you ready to talk about Nazis?
It's been a while, I guess, since we've had to talk about the Nazis here.
It's right? Been a minute, I think.
Yeah.
We've spent some time in the Pacific.
We haven't done U-boats in a while.
You know what? I didn't even go onto uboat.net to work on this episode, so that's good.
For those who might be newer listeners to the show, uboat.net is our tainted source of information, very good information on U-boat operations in World War II, almost too good, one has to wonder.
Much in the way that Panzer General is a great game, a great World War II strategy game, there's just some people that do modding and custom paint jobs that are a little too into it.
People, when you go in their house and they're like, I'm a history enthusiast, I love World War II, and you're like desperately looking for the Allied stuff.
Yeah. This is my collection of Nazi daggers.
Yeah.
Well, no daggers. We're dagger-free today. And ultimately, this story will have a happy ending. But we got a little background to do to get there. So, as you may have guessed, we're going to talk about the German battleship Tirpitz today. She is the second of two Bismarck-class battleships. That name probably rings a few bells for any World War II history buffs out there. She is the sister ship of the Bismarck, who, if we're being honest, probably should have done that one first. But here we are. We're talking Tirpitz.
I think that's more of our move in this situation.
Absolutely.
We would want, I mean, not that the Tirpitz is some undiscovered gem of naval history. But yeah, I'm cool starting with this one.
It's the reason we've done the Britannic and not the Titanic. She's named after Grand Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz. Tirpitz is credited with organizing the German Navy that came out of the German unification. So he's kind of the guy who gets all of that together, because prior to this, there is no German Navy. It doesn't exist.
We talked about this, I think it was part 1 of the Lusitania series, where we kind of discussed the the baby steps of the German Navy sort of being assembled from these German states, most of which don't have navies at all. And even the Prussian Navy is basically just a few Coast Guard ships.
There's really not much of a need for like a Bavarian Navy.
Yeah, what are you going to do with it?
In the opening chapter of yesterday's Deterrent, Jonathan Steinberg highlights how tightly the very concept of German naval prowess was bound to Germany's concept of itself as a nation.
Without national unity, there could be no navy in Germany. The simple facts of Germany's geography tied the fate of the navy to that of the nation from the beginning of the unification movement. Before 1866, the short northern coastal strip and the three main river basins were not controlled by one authority. And without such unified control, German naval power had no real basis. Since geography had inescapably joined the German Navy and the German nation, the Navy naturally became entangled in the struggle for national identity.
In the beginning, the German Navy stood out from basically every other government institution due to its being tied directly to the person of the Kaiser. Got a little bit more here from Steinberg.
Within Bismarck's empire, the Navy had a special position. Since it had not existed prior to 1871, it had to become an imperial institution. And according to Article 53 of the Reich Constitution, the Navy was explicitly stated to be an institution of the Reich, under the supreme command of the Kaiser. This made it unique in a country where even the postal, customs, and railroad services were not national. There was no German army because the individual sovereigns retained certain powers over their own troops.
What do you want to do here?
I dropped this into the notes also. I was curious what that whole article said. And so the first part of Article 53 of the German Constitution here that they're referring to says, "The war navy of the empire is one united navy under the supreme command of the emperor. The organization and composition thereof is the business of the emperor, who appoints the naval officers and officials, and into whose service they and the men are to be sworn."
So yeah, we can see like the Navy does kind of get special treatment, like you said. Like not even the railroads operate like this. So Tirpitz has a big hand in that. Tirpitz had been the Grand Admiral and State Secretary of the German Imperial Navy from 1897 until 1916. Under Tirpitz, the German Navy made its first moves to directly challenge Britain at sea. Tirpitz did not believe in the efficacy of commerce raiding alone against an empire with global reach of Britain. So he proposed that our fleet must be so constructed that it can unfold its greatest military potential between Heligoland and the Thames. To do this, Tirpitz was a major advocate for the construction of battleships at the expense of cruisers. Tirpitz envisioned a German home fleet of 19 battleships, a squadron of 8 armored coastal ships, 6 heavy cruisers, and 18 light cruisers. When it was this home fleet that he predicted would decide any conflict with Britain. From Tirpitz himself, as quoted by Jonathan Steinberg.
Just a note I'll leave in here, probably, when it says 8 armored coastal ships, I don't know what those are. I'm sure you could look those up. They're just called Panzerschiffe, like just armor ships. So I don't know what
kind of envision that as almost being like sloop-like. You know what I mean? Like some smaller vessel that
like
isn't
an ironclad.
Yeah.
The fact that occasionally an individual cruiser overseas may be weaker than its opponent must never be considered important. Only the main theater of war will be decisive. In this sense, the selection of a ship design in peacetime is applied naval strategy. It will never be possible in any event to prevent a German ship occasionally confronting a stronger adversary. It's a delusion to imagine that it's possible to meet such an eventuality by the appropriate choice of ships.
Interesting. Like he's definitely someone with like a vision for the Navy. Like there's definitely a strong like naval policy being put forward here.
And there you can see the kind of the received knowledge of the day of that focus on big fleet confrontation somewhere roughly between where the two of us are. And that's how we fight a naval war. And everything else is always going to be kind of ancillary. And if, we lose a couple cruisers in the Indian Ocean, who cares if we have this home fleet capable of destroying everyone else.
So during World War I, Tirpitz became a strong advocate of unrestricted submarine warfare, which I think is kind of interesting given like he is such a capital ship guy. But I think he is also he's smart enough to realize like when war changes, he is willing to embrace the U-boat. So before Tirpitz ascended through the ranks of the Prussian and then German Navy, one of the first areas of specialization was in torpedo boats. And he's pretty instrumental in the German Navy's development of offensive rather than defensive torpedo strategy. First with the torpedo boats, and then later, more famously and effectively, with the submarines. And I imagine that probably has something to do with his strategy of being willing to embrace the U-boat.
Effective torpedoes, even marginally so, are kind of a new thing. And so I can see a lot of the older Navy people probably being very skeptical of them. But again, Tirpitz coming from that background really makes a lot of sense of using them this way. Because like we talked about with Lusitania, like the submarine in its modern capacity is conceived of more as a harbor defense thing rather than something that is going to be hunting down vessels on the high seas.
So with all that, you may have caught that I said he worked until 1916. It's a pretty exciting time in Germany, I would say.
Yeah, especially if you're a former military guy.
And you might wonder, what did he get up to after that? What did he do with his days after World War One?
I've kind of been enjoying reading about him, so I'd probably rather not know.
Well, if you guessed that he would become the chairman of the far-right German Fatherland Party.
Is that its name? The far-right German
No, I added that in just for clarification.
Say that's a bit on the nose.
That would later become the German National People's Party.
That doesn't sound much better.
No. I guess marginally better than the actual Nazi party because they were monarchists.
I know there were a lot of like monarchist groups also at the same time kicking around in like the same circles.
This one was described as nationalist, anti-communist, and monarchist. So like, not great.
Not a good combination.
This group would eventually merge somewhat and vote with the Nazi party. So
like there's not a lot of daylight, I guess, when it comes down to it.
No, they're just a different scoop of a very similar flavored ice cream.
Wait, people further to the center will ally with the fascists and the Nazis to preserve their own position in society?
I'm not even sure that they were actually further to the center. I do see you've added a note here that they had a youth wing with an interesting name.
The Bismarck Jugend. It's not the Hitler Jugend, so it could be worse. Doesn't sound great.
Yeah, this is definitely like the party that wants Bismarck as does he become president?
I think so. I think they have a president and a chancellor.
Yeah, like he becomes president and then Hitler becomes chancellor. Like this is definitely the party that is pushing for Bismarck to be like a figurehead or something.
Hindenburg.
Hindenburg.
Right? Yeah, Bismarck has been dead for a while.
That's right. Bismarck is dead. Wrong German fascist.
Wrong portly mustachioed German man. Hindenburg had a mustache, right?
I'm pretty sure.
Had to have. Yeah. Oh, big one.
It's the time of cool mustaches, just like in Death by Lightning. Back to the present, which is pre-World War II in this case. The Bismarck class was designed to counter the expansion of the French Navy. In particular, the French had created or had just built two battleships of the Richelieu class.
Do you have their names? Probably
one was the Richelieu. I don't know what the other one was.
Richelieu class battleships.
They're like what's referred to as a fast battleship. I guess what we would think of when we think of a classic like World War II battleship, more like the Iowa or the North Carolina, that more sleek design.
We've talked about the North Carolina a bit for those who've listened to our bonus series on the battles, the naval battles of Guadalcanal. Looks like, the Richelieu class consisted of Richelieu, Jean Bart, Clemenceau, and Gasson.
Did they actually build all those?
It doesn't look like they finished all of them. They finished
I think
the
they
first
got
two.
interrupted. Yeah, they got interrupted before they could finish.
Yes. It looks like the Clemenceau was laid down January 1939.
That's a bad time to be laying down a new ship.
And the Gaston was never started.
Back to the Bismarck class here. Like, on paper, everything conforms to the Anglo-German Naval Agreement. It's under 35,000 tons that was imposed by the Washington Naval Treaty. But as we've discussed before, everybody's basically cheating this. Like, everybody's finding ways to get around these restrictions.
Yeah, this is like, I mean, it seems like cycling in the 90s. If you are not cheating, you literally are not trying to win.
Right. By the time these vessels are completed in the Bismarck class, the international treaty system's completely fallen apart. Like, everyone's showing what they really got because there's no more rules. So on to the construction. The Tirpitz is laid down in November of 1936 in Wilhelmshaven. She would be launched in April of 1939 and commissioned in February of 1941. The ship would be christened by the daughter of Alfred von Tirpitz, and, in case you were wondering, yes, Hitler would attend the launching of the vessel.
I mean, it's a big deal. I
mean, what else has he got to do, right?
I think he has a lot of other stuff to do, honestly, but, you know, this is a big event.
So the vessel will be 823 feet long, have a 118-foot beam, and a 34-foot draft. She's a big girl. She would be the heaviest battleship built by a European power, displacing 52,600 tons when fully equipped. It's almost 2,000 tons more than the Bismarck. I think a lot of that is due to some of the armament and weapon systems that she had. So they're essentially the same ship. So her main battery consisted of 8 38-centimeter or 15-inch guns. These guns were laid out in pairs, or in 4 pairs of 2. And, of course, we have names for each turret. The first forward gun was Anton.
like human names.
Oh, yeah. Second forward name is Bruno. The first aft gun is Caesar.
That's a good one.
And the second aft is Dora.
Oh.
Little Dora. Ironically, these all are great names for dachshunds. So she'd have 12 15-centimeter or 6-inch guns. Anti-aircraft guns consisted of 16 10.5-centimeter guns, 16 3.7-centimeter, and 12 2-centimeter guns. Eventually, there would be a total of 58 2-centimeter guns installed on board. And we'll get into why that happened.
2 centimeters, that's nothing.
And then she'd also have 8 21-inch torpedo tubes, which are added in 1942. That's one thing I always forget with like battleships is like they can launch torpedoes too.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially the Tirpitz. You can't name it the Tirpitz and not let it fire torpedoes.
Her armor consisted of a main belt that was 320 millimeters thick. That's about 12.5 inches. Her deck armor in the upper section was 50 millimeters, which is 2 inches. And her main deck area was 120 millimeters, which is 4.7 inches. The main turret face had 360 millimeters of armor, which is 14 inches of steel. That's a lot. She did have radar. I know that's something that comes into play in the Pacific campaign somewhat that we've talked about. The Japanese tending to not have as advanced radar systems, if at all.
That'll come up. That's actually a big part of our next and final Guadalcanal episode, is not only having radar, but deciding whether to use it or not.
So Tirpitz was equipped with a Model 23 search radar mounted forward, foretop, and in the rear rangefinder. This would be upgraded to a Model 27 and Model 26 later in the war. So they tend to keep up on her technology. Like, she's pretty state-of-the-art when she's launched.
Mm-hmm.
We have a quote here from Craig L. Symonds, World War II at Sea.
Back in the summer of 1936, when the keels of the battleships Bismarck and Tirpitz were laid down, Raeder had envisioned a time when they would merely be the first of an entire fleet of super battleships. Plan Z, which Hitler had approved in 1939 just before the outbreak of war, called for a total of 10 such ships.
This Plan Z went hand in hand with the proposed double pole approach, as described by Kenneth Hansen.
Under the double pole approach, single high-endurance warships would engage in distant operations against British commerce, while two small but powerful battle groups, each formed around battleships plus a single aircraft carrier, and screened by diesel-powered light cruisers and destroyers, maintained local sea control in the North and Norwegian seas.
I think that's interesting, this whole double pole approach, these high endurance ships that would do the distant operations. And I think you see that, I think one of the most famous examples is the Admiral Graf Spee, where you don't think of the Battle of the River Platte in World War II, but it happened. It's pretty interesting that that's part of the German Navy.
Instead of the River Plate, I was thinking of the Platte River in
oh shit, I said Platte
in what is it, in Utah, Wyoming, somewhere out
Nebraska.
there?
It's one that you cross an Oregon Trail. Yeah. No, River Plate, not
River
Platte. My American comes out sometimes.
I was going to draw a connection back to the Pacific. We've talked obviously a lot about ships on both sides in that series, and for both the Japanese and the Americans, we've always been talking about groups, task forces and battle groups that are centered around specific vessels. Kind of reminds me of this, of saying these battleships are not nearly their maximum usefulness on their own. But if they're operating in a group with these other supporting vessels, these things would be unstoppable.
It is interesting how much support goes into these vessels. And I guess you could draw a parallel nowadays to an aircraft carrier. You're never going to have an aircraft carrier by itself. You're going to have all these destroyers and cruisers and things working around it.
On the landward side of things with the tank, figuring out, okay, what's the best thing to actually do with these? And quickly figure, okay, we need to send some infantry with them also.
Yeah, we can't just drive these into the middle of a city. So Bismarck and Tirpitz are planned to work together to raid Allied shipping and restrict the flow of goods and material to the Soviet Union. And if that goes well, they can start restricting more goods towards the UK. It's interesting because we've talked a lot about the submarine warfare and the blockades of the United Kingdom and all the sinkings off the east coast of the United States. But all of that's done with U-boats. It would be really weird to think about the Bismarck and the Tirpitz being out in the Atlantic. But I mean, if any, it's a big area denial weapon that if it exists out in the ocean and you don't know where it is, you really can't just sail a convoy out there blindly because they would be sitting ducks.
I think that's the interesting, because I have never really read extensively about the naval battles in the Atlantic in World War II. And it's just the polar opposite in terms of the area you're dealing with. You have so many tight little areas and inlets and straits and things like that to deal with on this side. It's hard to, find open water basically for a lot of these ships. Whereas in the Pacific, you're dealing with these enormously vast distances where they're trying to just find where they are, where the other people are. It's a totally opposite problem here.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing we'll see, that the British pretty much always know where the Tirpitz is. But they have to know that. Otherwise, it's a lot more dangerous. Raeder, I guess we haven't properly introduced Admiral Raeder yet. Admiral Carl Raeder. Is it Carl? Is he Carl?
I think it's Eric.
Eric, that's right. Carl is Dernitz. Erich Raeder is in charge of the German Navy at this time, and he's still a proponent of large service ships. Definitely likes the idea of a big, decisive naval battle. However,
for a guy who was sentenced to life imprisonment at the Nuremberg trials, he sure has a nice-looking photo on Wikipedia.
He would actually be relieved of command after the Battle of the Barents Sea in late December 1942 and would be replaced by Karl Dönitz, also a veteran of the Nuremberg trials.
I was reading a bit about this aspect of it, the top brass sort of back and forth, and it kind of relates to that book I read, that the Jonathan Steinberg, Yesterday's Deterrent, about Tirpitz and building the German Navy. All of the infighting in the upper echelons of the German Navy. And so this change here interested me because Raeder obviously is a big believer in the decisive surface fleet engagement, and Dönitz is the submarine guy.
Right.
And so this is, you see this ramping up of submarine warfare under Dönitz because he thinks that is what's going to win the war or help to win the war. There's an article, I think we've referred to it already, by Kenneth Hansen. It's called Raeder versus Wegener, Conflict in German Naval Strategy. And it kind of introduces the really awkward position that the German Navy's in at the beginning of World War II, saying the German Navy of the 1930s was confronted by what has been described as a classic medium-power naval dilemma. The Kriegsmarine was caught perilously between its own limited capabilities, national maritime tasks, and a limited budget.
It's enough to be expensive and complicated, basically.
It's kind of, when it comes to the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe and all the other armed forces of Nazi Germany, you kind of, in the early war, you kind of have this feeling of, oh, well, there's infinite money for tanks, there's infinite money for planes, and you sort of forget about the Navy even existing, kind of.
Well, that's something you'll kind of see is like the German Navy gets dealt the hand they're dealt at the beginning of the war, and that's it. There are no more ships.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of resources to put into the Navy. So it's and it's interesting seeing some of these interwar plans for that, because they're basically operating on that assumption that that's a possibility. What can we do with what we have now?
So appointed as chief of the Admiralty in 1928, Raeder had come to a middle ground between the emphasis on local supremacy in the North Sea and on globe-spanning cruiser warfare. This is from Klaus Schroeder in Marine. What is this? Officer?
It says Marine Offizier Vereinigung. It's like a journal for Navy officers.
This is cited in Ron, who is cited in Hansen.
There's a whole list of citations
It's a circular citation
that I had to follow back to this. Klaus Schroeder is the one who originally wrote these words. All naval theaters of war formed a homogeneous whole, and consequently, any operation must be viewed in its correlation with other sea areas. Accordingly, cruiser warfare overseas and operations by the battle fleet in home waters were integral components of a single naval strategy which, by exploiting the diversionary effect, sought to weaken the enemy's force and to disrupt supplies.
Speed, and more importantly endurance, would become priorities for Kriegsmarine vessels under Raeder. Example being, despite her massive size, Tirpitz can still generate 30 knots. So it's pretty quick for a vessel that's that large, especially at this time.
I think I saw something where that she was faster than any vessel the British had. I don't know if that's confirmable or where I saw that, but yeah, that seems incredibly fast for something that's also the biggest ship built in Europe here.
And, yeah, biggest and heaviest. Raeder's middle approach would also be reflected in how Germany's navy was deployed after the outbreak of the war.
Extensive defensive measures were implemented from the first days of the war to deny coastal waters to enemy forces, and assert local control to protect strategic shipping. These commitments made the knockout blow anticipated by British intelligence a complete impossibility. Nonetheless, the Kriegsmarine set about a dynamic program of dispersal in the hope of creating maneuver opportunities needed to exploit German material superiority at the unit level. This unconventional approach made capital ships, by virtue of their high endurance, into supercruisers capable of conducting open ocean trade warfare.
It is definitely interesting to see, like, in the beginning of the war, kind of what the thoughts are. And it's weird how little you hear about U-boats being that thing to disrupt far away. Although I think that is by far the most effective tool the Germans had in the Navy, at least.
Yeah, I mean, we had a deeper talk about that with the Lusitania episode also, but yeah, it's interesting to see how the U-boat kind of becomes that out of necessity. This is the thing we have that happens to work a little bit better.
Carrying on here, let's get into it. Let's talk about the star of the show. Let's talk Tirpitz. Training. After completing sea trials, the Tirpitz was stationed in Kiel, where she would undergo intense training in the Baltic Sea. While stationed in Kiel, Germany would make their biggest mistake of the war and go to war with the Soviet Union.
It goes okay at first.
A Baltic fleet was created with the Tirpitz being the flagship for the very brief life that this fleet existed. This consisted of heavy cruiser Admiral Scheer, light cruisers Kolin, Nuremberg, Leipzig, and Emden.
Köln.
What is it?
Köln.
Köln.
Or Köln, you could say, I guess.
Köln. Usually German pronunciation's decently easy. I don't like that one.
Or you could go French and call it Cologne.
I was assuming that's what it was. Now, there'd also be multiple destroyers and 2 flotillas of minesweepers. Pretty nice flotilla we got there. This group would be under the command of Vice Admiral Otto... Is this Celax?
I don't know. It looks like... I think in English we would pronounce this celiacs, and it sounds like a medicine you'd see advertised to ask your doctor about on TV. But I don't know. Like, I assume that CI is probably like a sh sound, like Hiliax, maybe. I don't know.
Well, he's the man in charge.
What a weird name.
Yeah, that one stood out. It doesn't sound German.
No, it sounds like a Gallic chieftain who would have fought against Julius Caesar.
So they would patrol off of Åland, southwest of Finland. This would only last from the 23rd to the 26th of September 1941. Basically, there's just no Soviet naval threat, so there's no reason for them to be steaming around out there.
Oh, they'll get them back later. Maybe a ship that we will do an episode about.
Tirpitz would then resume training. She's still new, her crew's still fresh, so there's still plenty of training to be done. This was sort of an emergency thing just in case the Russians tried to resist in some way. Tirpitz would get practice with her main and secondary batteries when shelling the old pre-dreadnought Hansen, which was a radio-controlled target ship. I'd like to drive that. Wouldn't that be fun to be the guy that gets to control that?
Yeah, just like a RC car.
During this time, Tirpitz would come under attack from the RAF, but no major damage was done. So here we already see the constant threat that the RAF poses here. Kiel is attackable from the air by Britain.
Was this a targeted attack on the Tirpitz, or was it she happened to be there when they were bombing it?
I think it was more coincidental. Now we'll go on to the Tirpitz' first deployment. In November 1941, Eric Raeder decided that Tirpitz' first deployment would be to Norway. And there's 2 main objectives that he had in mind. Tirpitz would be able to attack convoys bound for the USSR. These convoys are already exceptionally dangerous without the German threat. From Daniel Knowles' Tirpitz, The Life and Death of Germany's Last Great Battleship.
In the winter months, the Arctic Ocean is among the planet's most forbidding areas. The rays of the sun cannot be seen for many months, while the pack ice gradually creeps south. Time and time again, icebergs break loose from the pack and drift south, melting slowly in the cold water. In the low temperature, men did not survive long if their ships sunk. As few ships traveled the area and visibility was often poor, chances of rescue were slim.
Yeah, so we can see this is already dangerous without Tirpitz or Bismarck roaming around.
I mean, like we saw in our recent Arctic series on the Karluk, if you end up in the water, you don't have a lot of time. Or any of our, Alaska episodes we've done.
The second main objective from deploying her to Norway is that she would act as a fleet in being. Basically, she would occupy British naval assets and discourage any land invasion of Norway.
I understand that there is a strategic purpose to it, but it also kind of seems like I forgot to do my homework at Admiral School, and it's like, comes in, what's your plan? It's like, fleet in being.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something, it's almost like when you see a team run a wildcat offense and the quarterback splits out to be a receiver, like you still have to account for him, even though you're like, he's probably not going to do anything. So Hitler would agree with this proposal, as it kept Tirpitz out of the Atlantic. Part of the reason for this is he did not want a repeat of the Bismarck.
When did the Bismarck sink?
earlier than you think.
When was she sunk, rather? Was it like 1940? Is it in the song? Is it in the Johnny Horton song? I'm trying to think of the lyrics.
She sank the 27th of May, 1941.
Okay.
So yeah, like she sinks way earlier than like I always think she does in my head.
One of the first casualties of the war of British aggression.
So yeah, Hitler really doesn't want that to happen again to one of his shiny toy battleships. Before she could be deployed, the vessel underwent a refit that included strengthening the anti-air defenses and other upgrades to optimize her existing guns. Essentially, in this, like, it's becoming more and more clear that there's going to be air threats. So, how many anti-aircraft guns can we strap onto this thing?
They did that with some of the cruisers in the Pacific. I know they were sort of stripped down and rebuilt as anti-aircraft cruisers.
So, under the command of Captain Carl Topp, the ship was pronounced as ready for combat on January 10th, 1942. Now, I know many of you are thinking what I was thinking.
Is he related?
Carl Topp related to U-boat ace Eric Topp? Not that I could find out.
Okay.
I didn't go into uboat.net to check, though. They may know that answer.
Go to the forums. See what they're talking about there.
The ship would depart for Wilhelmshaven before making way to Trondheim. Part of this is done to confuse the British as to what her actual destination is. However, like I said,
Does it work?
really doesn't work that well. British military intelligence was aware of her movements as they could decrypt Enigma messages. However, poor weather prevented them from taking any action. So much of this is going to be the British know what's going on, but the weather in Norway sucks. On January 16th, 1942, British aerial recon would locate the Tirpitz in Trondheim. Tirpitz would then move to a smaller fjord branch northeast of Trondheim, and these movements are reported to the British by Norwegian resistance groups.
This seems like it's leading to a Medal of Honor Allied assault mission.
Absolutely.
Infiltrate the Navy Yard. Like, they have word that the Tirpitz is going to be entering and you have to infiltrate it and blow it up.
I'm pretty sure in one of them, I can't remember which one, you do go to Trondheim.
You do that with a submarine. You blow up a U-boat. I remember that.
Norway has a really robust resistance movement. I don't know that they did as much as like the French resistance as far as blowing stuff up and that, but a lot of it was intelligence for the British. They passed on a ton of information. One of the interesting things here is that she's actually moored right next to a cliff. Now, why would you moor a ship next to a cliff?
So you can snatch some puffins or something off of it.
Yeah, who needs a seagull gun when you can just grab them off there? She's actually they're going to do that to cut down on the angle of attack from the air. You've basically isolated one side of the ship from being able to be bombed. They are terrified of attack from the air.
Unless they hit the cliff really, really hard, then they could just like bring down the whole thing on you.
Another thing that I found interesting here, the crew would cut down trees in order to further conceal her location. They full on like cut down trees and laid them on the deck and stuff just to blend, basically.
It is really funny to imagine, though, like explaining to, an admiral from like the 1860s, 70s, like well before the advent, the possibility of the airplane being a thing, and having to explain to them why are you nuzzling your biggest battleship under a cliff and hiding it with branches? Like, what are you doing?
Another thing they would do to obscure themselves from aerial recon was create artificial fog with water and chlorosulfuric acid. So that's fun. A little science experiment.
That sounds pretty nasty, but I don't know. Maybe it's not.
In addition to these measures to obscure her position, there were additional anti-aircraft batteries placed around the cliffs, and anti-torpedo nets are deployed all around her. There's actually 2 layers of torpedo nets around her. So basically, she's just become like a fortress, essentially. Tirpitz was given the nickname the Lonely Queen of the North.
Die einsame Königin des Nordens.
She was rarely deployed, and this is due to fuel shortages, which would limit her ability, and that would also limit her ability to train. Because of this, life for the crew becomes a constant struggle against boredom, which is probably why they actually had them cutting down all those trees.
We need them for the hide and seek of the battleship.
The days mainly consisted of maintaining anti-air defense positions and just the maintenance of the vessel itself. One of the crew's only escapes is playing organized sports like soccer, boxing, wrestling, the kind of things guys do when they're grouped together on a boat. Just guys being dudes.
They probably got into the shower after those boxing matches.
Little schnapps, you know. As we can see, pretty boring so far. Pretty monotonous life. Not very fun. You're not sailing the high seas or raiding any commerce. So let's talk about her life as a convoy raider, or lack thereof. As we just mentioned, the primary constraint on the Tirpitz was lack of fuel for consistent operation. I think this is something that we've talked about a lot with the Pacific stuff that kept both Japanese and American battleships out of a lot of the action in the Pacific at various times.
Yeah, like the Japanese are a lot more free with the use of their battleships, since that's just a bigger part of their plans. But like, yeah, the American battleships are, even after they're repaired after Pearl Harbor, they're still kind of sidelined because they just drink so much fuel. I mean, like the Yamato, that's why it barely moves, is that it just takes an incredible amount of fuel to run it.
Before we get too much further, obviously the Nazis suck. It sucks that some of their uniforms looked kind of cool. They're also really good at naming operations, and I hate that.
Skip, you know I hate the Nazis. But
she would be used as a decoy for part of Operation Cerberus in February of 1942.
What is that?
I was about to say, are you familiar with Operation Cerberus?
I don't think so, no.
So she would deploy as if she was making way for the North Sea. This would provide a distraction while Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Prince Eugen made a dash through the English Channel.
To get into Germany or get out?
So they're actually going from France north to Germany.
Okay.
But they have to go through the English Channel to get there.
Right.
Operation Cerberus definitely deserves its own episode. We will do that at some point. It might be a good psych bonus episode or something. So as a result of this operation, there had already been a planned attack on convoy PQ-8 in late January. However, this gets canceled due to German destroyers being allocated to Operation Cerberus. Obviously, you can't just have the big capital ships make the run on their own. They would get picked apart by, torpedo boats and things like that. So they have to reallocate some things, and that pretty much means the Tirpitz gets to be a decoy and not much more. In late February of 1942, the Tirpitz would be joined by Admiral Scheer and the Prince Eugen, along with multiple destroyers. Prince Eugen had been torpedoed by a British submarine and was temporarily out of action. It happened basically right as she was getting to Norway, but that knocks her out of commission for a while. Prince Eugen is probably something about the pronunciation. I love it.
It's not in italic, so I'm imagining the actual Prince Eugen being torpedoed by a British submarine.
Yeah, you're a lot better about putting things in italics than I am in the notes. In March of 1942, Tirpitz and Admiral Scheer, the vessels, accompanied by 4 destroyers and 2 torpedo boats, were planned to attack the Britain-bound convoy QP-8 and the outgoing convoy PQ-12 as part of Operation Sports Palace.
Like named for the Sportpalast, like from the speech?
Yeah, I'm assuming. However, with a speed of only 26 knots, Admiral Scheer was not fast enough to effectively operate with Tirpitz. Admiral Scheer and the destroyer Paul Jacobi and 2 torpedo boats were released from the operation. So basically, they're just peeled off, and since they can't effectively operate with Tirpitz, they're sent back. So you're already reducing the force that's going to attack these convoys. On March 5th, a Luftwaffe recon plane spotted convoy PQ-12. However, It failed to identify the battleships HMS Duke of York or the battlecruiser HMS Renown and the 4 destroyers that were escorting the convoy. I think it's funny because you think, like, how could you miss those things? But then we think again back to the Pacific campaign where it's a lot harder than you think to identify these vessels and like how many there are and stuff.
You've got like cloud cover, and you've got to keep a certain distance, obviously, from where these are.
The Germans were unaware that in addition to these escorts, there was further distance support being provided by the battleship HMS King George V, carrier HMS Victorious, and heavy cruiser HMS Barrack, supported by 6 destroyers. So quite a like reserve force here. Plus you have the aircraft that Victorious could deploy. So not a great position to be in when you've already sent away like half your force.
Yeah, carrier combat in the Atlantic seems so weird.
Enigma decryption allowed the British to reroute the convoy and avoid the German forces altogether. Additionally, the British attempted an air attack on the German ships, but the results were minimal, with 3 sailors wounded on the Tirpitz, and her anti-aircraft guns claiming 2 British planes. So she finally does get like a little taste of combat, barely. Like she doesn't engage any surface targets, but she shoots down a couple planes.
I don't know the other realities of the situation, but I think it is also, I mean, it could be, I don't know, indicative of the esteem that the British have for the Tirpitz in that they don't attempt a ship-to-ship attack on her here, if they would even be able to.
There's definitely probably some lessons learned from Bismarck. The wound that the Hood left on the British Navy is still pretty fresh at this point. And I'm sure that no one wants a repeat of that.
Right.
So Tirpitz would arrive back in Trondheim on March 13th. All right, she went out, she steamed, she fought a little bit. That means she consumed a ton of fuel. This would cause a 3-month delay in any further deployment. Basically, she got all worked up. There wasn't anything to do, and now it was all for naught, basically.
It's kind of like when I finally, occasionally work out. It's like do a really hard workout and then, take a break for 2-3 months to recover from it.
Convoy PQ-17 would be the next target for the Tirpitz under Operation Knight's Move. The convoy would leave Iceland on June 27th, bound for the Soviet Union. She's being escorted by battleships HMS Duke of York, the USS Washington, which was a North Carolina class battleship, and the carrier Victorious.
Hold on, I was just seeing, what is this operation called in German?
Probably something awesome.
Unternehmen Rüsselsprung.
Tirpitz with the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper and the 6 destroyers would deploy from Trondheim, while a second group consisting of Admiral Scheer and heavy cruiser Lutzow, along with 6 destroyers, would deploy from Narvik. Lutzow and 3 destroyers would strike uncharted rocks and have to abandon the operation pretty much from the get. So we can see, yet again, it's not starting out great. Tirpitz would eventually come under fire from a Soviet submarine, K-21, shortly after leaving Norway. Reports vary between 2 or 4 torpedoes being fired at Tirpitz. However, there's no hits. What's weird is the Soviets claim that there were 2 hits. So I'm assuming they meant that they hit it, but the torpedoes were defective.
Literally just contacted it.
But there's no reports of damage on the German side. So whatever happened, it wasn't anything to cause any trouble for Tirpitz. Swedish intelligence alerted the British of the Tirpitz deployment, and the convoy was ordered to disperse. Note that I didn't say rerouted, I said disperse. Germany shifted tactics. The Germans would deploy the Luftwaffe and their U-boats. They're actually able to sink 21 of the 34 ships, as they're no longer grouped up and protected. So in a way, Tirpitz causes the conditions for that to happen, I guess.
That's something.
But, kind of like how assists don't get you in the Hall of Fame,
Is this like in hockey where they do like the 2-level assists?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not even like a basketball assist, is it? Tirpitz would then make her way to Altafjord, Norway. On October 23rd, Tirpitz would then move to Trondheim to undergo much-needed repairs and refittings. Her anchorage is reinforced with anti-aircraft guns and double torpedo nets. So this is kind of her making that final transition into like an anchored fortification, basically. The repairs were done in phases so that Tirpitz remained semi-operational during the work. Obviously, if you took the whole ship offline, it can't defend itself. Repairs would be completed by December 28th, and the vessel began sea trials. She would conduct gunnery trials on January 4th, 1943, in the Trondheim Fjord. Also, her captain, Captain Top, would be promoted to Rear Admiral on February 21st, 1943.
When you put it that way, Captain Top is a wonderful name. Goes very well with a few other names I came across while reading about this. One of them being Admiral Hugo von Pol, and the real star of the show was one named Admiral Kurt Assman.
I'm not the ass man. I think there's been a mistake.
What's your name again?
Cosmo Kramer.
Cosmo Kramer. You are the ass man.
No, I'm not the ass man.
Well, as far as the state of New York is concerned, you are.
Replacing Captain Top would be Captain Hans Meyer. Additionally, the Tirpitz would get a new neighbor when the Scharnhorst would arrive in Norway in March of 1943.
These are so confusing because all of these ship names, there was one in World War I also. So all of these are just reused. And I know we do that too, but it seems like all of the big name ships in both wars are the same.
Karl Dönitz, who had replaced Erich Raeder after the Battle of the Barents Sea, ordered the vessels to attack Spitsbergen, which is now called Svalbard, which lies basically where the Atlantic and the Arctic Oceans meet. There's someone on TikTok that posts from there, and like it's a wild place to live because they just like take a gun with you wherever you go because of the polar bears and stuff. Like it's very different. It somehow feels more American.
I was like, Americans take guns with them everywhere. We don't even have polar bears in most of the United States.
This operation would be called Zitronella, which launched on September 8th, 1943. I'm assuming Zitronella is citronella in German.
It translates it as lemonella in Google Translates. I don't know what it's supposed to be.
I think that would make sense.
Is lemonella a thing?
Well, no, but like citronella is like that's what we call it. But like, I wonder if that's just like in like that's the translation. I wonder.
A plant whose oil is used for perfumes and insect repellent. Okay, that's what I was thinking.
So the German battleships would be supported by 10 destroyers. So you may be asking yourself, what's on this island that's so important? It's actually a British weather station and refueling base. This base was garrisoned with 150 Norwegian armed forces in exile, basically. So if you were Norwegian and you escaped the oncoming Nazi invasion, the British said, hey, you want to go live in the Arctic Ocean? It's kind of interesting how this all goes down. This is, dare I say, the Tirpitz finally gets her moment of glory.
Well, not really, based on what I'm seeing here.
Tirpitz would fly a white ensign, or St. George's ensign, in order to confuse the defenders on the island and approach without resistance. Is that piracy, technically? Like flying false colors?
There's probably a specific name for it, but I don't think it would be piracy necessarily.
Yeah, I guess they're not.
Maybe it's frowned upon, but not technically illegal. I don't know.
Tirpitz would fire 52 main battery rounds and 82 from her secondary battery. This would be her first and only time engaging a surface target with her main guns. An amphibious assault force was deployed. They would destroy the weather installation and capture 74 prisoners before heading back to Norway, completing the entire operation in about 8 hours. So this is it. This is her big moment of glory. An 8-hour operation to capture a lightly defended weather station. In total, 2 Germans were killed. One was killed by enemy fire, and the other one was court-martialed and executed on the deck of the Scharnhorst for refusing to join the land party. Now, considering anything you could have been involved in the German military as far as like land operations,
this seems like one of the easier ones to do. Like, it seems like if you had to do one, this would probably be the one.
Yeah, like I don't think I'm not getting court-martialed and executed over this one. I'm gonna go take my chances with the Norwegians.
Maybe hang back in the group a little bit, let other people do the stuff. But
sure, like you don't need to be the first off the boat, but just get in there in the middle.
That's what I would do if I was a Nazi.
In total, 6 Norwegians were killed in the operation, with 74 becoming prisoners. So, all in all, a successful operation. They defeated a lightly defended weather station.
All right.
So, operationally, this is kind of where we'll leave it. This really is, I promise you, the high water mark. And I think part 2, we will focus on the many operations to sink the Tirpitz, because there's quite a few. The British spend a lot of time on the Tirpitz problem. So yeah, what are your thoughts so far? What do you think of the Tirpitz?
Well, I'm learning a lot. Again, I don't know. I know hardly anything about naval operations in the Atlantic in World War II. So it's really interesting to learn what was going on over there. Obviously, the convoys, but just knowing what is the German Navy actually doing.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. It's interesting seeing like the convoys and stuff that are going to the USSR in that Arctic route and stuff. That's stuff we don't really hear a lot about, but also like extremely vital to the operation and making everything work properly.
And fitting into the larger themes of the show in that, like, even if this were not during wartime with these prowling submarines and cruisers, this is a dangerous route, regardless. Even when everything is perfect and fine.
Yeah, it's dangerous to be out there. But that's where we'll wrap it up for today. And we're going to talk, I think we'll have some submarine action in the next episode, a lot of air action. Think about what a tall boy might be. Probably not the kind you're familiar with.
Is it anything like a long lance from the Pacific?
Kind of. Yeah, so if you guys are still here, thank you so much for listening. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, the normal stuff. We're a lot of fun on there. And yeah, we'll talk to you next week.